Okay. Thank you guys for having me here this morning. So I'm gonna just give like a very general overview of the microbiome for those of you that don't know what the microbiome is. It's definitely a hot topic in research right now because it's a very diverse system that's going on the inside of our. Oh, do you want? Is this a microphone? Okay, is this a microphone? Oh, oh, okay, okay. So we're going to start off with just the basics, which I'm going to go over the basics of the microbiome. What is it? How it connects and interacts with our body? How to maintain a healthy microbiome, and current and future research. So the introduction, I'm going to start off with the anatomy of the gastrointestinal system. Starts off with the mouth, which goes into the esophagus, and then ultimately the stomach, small and large intestine. So in our mouth is where the digestion begins through the mechanical breakdown of food, production of saliva to soften the food, to create a bolus, and down into the esophagus, into the stomach, where gastric juices break it down for nutrient absorption onto the small intestine and out of your body through the colon, which is obviously the elimination of waste. Some of the common gastrointestinal disorders that I deal with in my practice are IBS, colitis, so like inflammatory bowel diseases, and reflux. And these are extreme variations in microbiome. So typically you might have an overgrowth of a bad bacteria, an undergrowth of a good bacteria, or you just don't have this symbiotic relationship between the microbiome and how it's interacting with the overall system of your body. So the basics of the microbiome. So it's vital for bodily function. What does that mean? So it's vital for breaking down food, digestion, absorbing nutrients, and ultimately onto the main goal, which is elimination and protecting your body overall through a healthy immune system. When you don't have a healthy microbiome, you're much more prone to chronic disease, inflammatory conditions, and you're just vulnerable. Let me just say it that way. So if anybody here who works with seniors knows that a lot of them have chronic constipation, they're constantly bloated, and that's an effect of a poor microbiome. And ultimately, I'll talk about that more later, how that happens and what the specific considerations from an elderly population that we should think about when we're helping elderly individuals. And some of the factors that affect the microbiome, diet is a huge one. So garbage in, garbage out is as simple as I could tell you. So if you're going to eat processed foods, lots of sugar, things that don't have a lot of fiber, garbage in, garbage out. You're going to be more constipated, more bloated, more intestinal discomfort, gas, indigestion, things of that nature. And then what does that lead to? Medication. Medication affects the microbiome in a negative way. So it's just this constant cycle of chasing your tail where I don't feel good. Why don't I feel good? Well, because I'm not going to the bathroom. Why am I not going to the bathroom? Because I'm not really eating that well, and on and on and on. And people just, shove supplements and looking for the latest and greatest. And really, in the end of the day, it's just the basics. What are you eating? And that's what I focus on. Lifestyle choices are another one. Poor sleep, inactivity, people that are sedentary. I don't know if people are aware that sitting is now the new smoking. The longer you sit, the worse it is, the worse your health outcomes are. When you move your body, the microbiome moves. It's a peristaltic mechanism of moving food from the mouth on the way out, and it just moves by muscle contraction. And when you're sitting, there's no reason for that to do that. So it's very, very important to get exercise. 10,000 steps, take the stairs, all of those simple tricks, they really do add up. Medications are another one. So right now, we are overusing PPIs in everybody. And it's really unfortunate. So what do I mean by PPIs, for those of you that don't know, the pantoprazole, Protonics, Pepsid, things of that nature, people just pop them. Now, what does that mean? So when you're taking that, your microbiome is not in a position to absorb the nutrients. So now we're finding vitamin D deficiency in a lot of people, and not just elderly, but it's a lot of people. I see a lot of these people like, oh, I'm so tired. I don't know why. And a lot of times it's just a vitamin B deficiency. And, it's typically because they're not absorbing the nutrients that your body is, that you're eating. The other one would be statins. Statins do negatively impact the microbiome. Now, does everybody need a statin? I will not get on my soapbox about that. But in the end of the day, the mainstay of my topic and talk is always going to be, what are you putting in your body? Is there a way to manage your cholesterol by using diet? And then environmental exposures. Are we eating these processed foods, things that come in a package? If it has a barcode on it, you should really be looking at the label. If there's things in there that you can not pronounce, maybe you shouldn't be eating it. People don't like to hear that. I'm definitely an acquired taste when it comes to dealing with clients, because I'm going to say things that they don't want to hear. But if you want to work with me and you want to get better, there's some changes that have to be made. Just is. And then we look at our water supply. We do have a lot of antibiotics leaking into our water supply. That's just a fact. Toxins from, things that get sprayed on crops. And this might be inevitable, but these are things that people need to consider. The leaching of plastic from plastic bottles, and people, my father, I can't even tell you how many cases he keeps in his garage, but that plastic, it's soft and it's permeable and it leaches out. And if anybody has taken chemistry in their life, they understand how chemicals work and interfere with the environment. Nothing lasts forever. Everything has a shelf life. So what's the connection between gut health and the microbiome? So how does it influence our digestion? Well, like I said before, when you have good bacteria, it breaks down the food that you're eating and it absorbs the nutrients. So it might be vitamin D, it might be folic acid, it might be, the B12s or any of the other B vitamins. It also helps with blood sugar regulation. Right now we have an obesity epidemic. I'm sure you guys have been beaten over the head with that information, that obesity is a chronic disease. And ultimately, it can lead to disability, stroke, heart attack. And a lot of this can be corrected with just eating the right food and maintaining a healthy microbiome. And let's see. And then again, just overall, it can help with digestive disorders that people are dealing with these days. Okay, so how does it interact with the immune system? Again, so if anybody here has worked with seniors, they know that C. diff is one of the worst things that a senior citizen can get, right? And that is an extreme alteration in microbiome dysfunction, right? And so that puts them at such a vulnerable state where now they're in the hospital for longer than they need to. Now they're getting a bed sore because they can't turn around, or they're getting excoriations in their genital area, and then what does that lead to? Sundowning. Now we're medicating them more, and it's just this cycle over and over and over. And any of us here have worked in the hospital have seen that. You've seen it in the ICU, you've seen it on med surg. You have these poor patients, they're stuck in the hospital for 3, 4, 5 weeks. And luckily, some of the newer research studies are using healthy microbiome and transplanting them into people with C. diff to try to eradicate it, because unfortunately, C. diff, once it gets out of control, it's very difficult. And so they medicate, and all these antibiotics, and now they're on 3, 4, antibiotics. Now their kidneys are shutting down, right? They're vulnerable. And so they are looking at using stool transplants from a healthy individual to a person that has C. diff, and they're seeing really good results. Sounds disgusting, but it's actually really making a huge impact, where they're shortening the duration of them being on medication, and they're staying in the hospital. The other thing that they're looking at is how the microbiome from an individual who has a healthy metabolism, metabolically healthy, to a person that's unhealthy or obese. They're studying how they're transplanting healthy microbiome from a person who has a good metabolism to a person that doesn't. They're doing it in mice right now, and they're realizing that when you take stool from a mouse who has a really good metabolism and metabolic system and transplanting into an obese mouse, they're losing weight. So there is definitely a strong connection between the microbiome and your overall immune system. And whether or not you want to admit it, obesity is a chronic disease, and it should be looked at that way. And then again, just as I had said before, it is linked to diabetes. Poor glucose regulation starts in the gut. When you are not absorbing it, now your sugar's floating around a longer time. Now you become insulin resistant because your body's working harder to put that glucose into the cells where it belongs, and now it's not going anywhere. So it's just, hanging around, and people are getting larger and larger and larger. It all impacts, the vital organs on the inside, and it becomes its own organ, and it secretes hormones, really bad hormones that create a lot of inflammation. Some of you might have heard of, visceral fat, and it becomes its own organ, and it secretes unhealthy, toxic hormones. Okay, so how do you maintain a healthy microbiome? I mean, if I haven't beat this with a dead horse, it's really through what you're eating. So a lot of people do like to take, probiotics, and they do have their role, okay? And again, there's a lot of research that's lacking in probiotics in general, but also in supplements, because it's only looked at as generally safe. They're regulated, but not like a medication. So they don't have to go through the same rigorous testing as like a medication does through the FDA, right? And so they are looked at relatively safe. Okay, GRAS, generally recognized as safe. And so you're also talking about a bacteria that is encapsulated. So is it alive? Is it dead? And I meet too many people that buy things off of Amazon because they see an influencer, and it's like, okay, but why don't you just start with what's in your refrigerator? Kefir is great. Plain kefir has a really good amount of probiotics. Sauerkraut, like real true sauerkraut, not the stuff that comes out of a can, like real fermented sauerkraut, that has great probiotics. A little bit of kombucha is another good source. Kimchi, that for those of you that like spicy foods, kimchi is a great source. And other like fermented items, like if you belong to like an Amish farm, a lot of times you can find some really good fermented vegetables there. And that's just a great way to gently inoculate your system in a healthy way. Fiber. Fiber is huge. Why does fiber help? Because fiber feeds the good bacteria. And when you're eating good fiber, you're feeding the good bacteria, and now you're eliminate all of the waste. Think about when you eat, a lot of people just take Benefiber or Metamucil. You're bulking up the stool, and then you're eliminating all of that waste. But if you just eat veggies, these kind of, doing the same thing. And then obviously fruits and vegetables. We all know that they have antioxidants and they're healthy for us, so we all know that. I talked about probiotics. So let's talk about prebiotics. So prebiotics would be like a fiber. And these are typically like non-starchy or resistant starchy vegetables, like Jerusalem artichokes. I don't even know how many people even know what that is. They actually are delicious if you could ever find them, but they are they just have a very fibrous, dense, it's like a tuber. And it looks like a nugget. It's called the Jerusalem artichoke. It's actually not an artichoke. It is a root, yeah. It almost looks like a ginger root, and they're very difficult to find. Sorry? It's a sunchoke. It's a sunchoke, exactly. That's the other name. So that's a really good example of a prebiotic. They're very non-starchy. They're very fibrous, and the role of that is to feed the good bacteria. The more good bacteria you have, the less opportunity you have for the bad to take over and create, havoc in your body. And then we talked about lifestyles again. So sleep, how does sleep impact the body negatively, right? And so when you are lacking sleep, typically most of us that don't get enough sleep, we know that we're gravitating towards whatever is not nailed down because our bodies are so exhausted. It's sugary, it's tasty, I'm trying to stay awake. So when you don't sleep well, you don't make good food choices. Your cortisol is also up. When your cortisol is up, then the whole digestive system is just kind of functioning on fumes, right? And it's also a way to store more sugar. And then I talked about lack of physical activity. When you don't exercise, the whole system isn't moving, and then things are just staying in there. And people that are constipated are usually miserable. And I don't even understand how people can think it's normal to not go to the bathroom except for once a week. I can't wrap my brain around that. But just think about the impact. You're holding on to food that you ate like a week ago and it's just sitting there. So I'll talk about some age-related considerations. So elderly people, as you know, they typically have trouble with their dentition, right? So they might have poor fitting dentures. They might have a lack of appetite. They might not have the drive to eat, right? They also don't really have the drive to drink. Their thirst is decreased. So now when you're not drinking enough water, you're not lubricating the system, they tend to be more constipated. They have trouble mechanically breaking down fibrous foods, so you don't see them eating as much vegetables or fruit because it's physically difficult for them. They don't produce a lot of saliva. They don't produce a lot of stomach acid. And so the system just kind of is slower now. So how do we help them? Well, that's a real tricky one because obviously we're focused on getting them the calories, but a lot of times it comes in these shakes that they get. And I don't know if anybody here has read the ingredients or if anybody's worked in the hospital and looked at like what goes in a tube feeding. It's just the first ingredient is like some kind of partially hydrogenated something, and somewhere in there, I mean, I don't even know if there's real food in there, to be honest. It's just so with salt, it's sugar, there's fat, there's so many things in it, right? And so this is a real challenge, and so how do we fix this? I think we have to fix this by looking at alternative resources on how to get them the better nutrition. And maybe it is through more pureed whole foods or, helping them cook. But it's a real challenge, and I get that. And not everybody has the resources for that. So I do understand that. And again, these populations are typically on a statin, and they're usually on a PPI, and a lot of them are on these bisphosphonates that, help with their calcium. So it's a real challenge in our elderly population. But ultimately, if we look at the end of that, what does it lead to? Increased hospitalizations because they're weak, they fall, they're not active. And, I think one of the best things that we could do for our patients is making sure that they stay active. So how do we do that? Send them to physical therapy once a year. So now that they're out of the house once a month or twice a month or whatever it is that Medicare pays for, and they're getting their physical activity and they're just going to a place and they're doing a little bit of resistance training. Maybe they're riding a bike, something. I just feel like, and maybe I'm an idealist, but I feel like if we can maintain our activity, we are going to be better off. And lastly, I briefly touched on this. Some of the current studies that are being looked at right now in microbiome and our overall health is how it impacts our metabolism. As I had said before, they're studying obese mice and, slender mice and transplanting stool and realizing that there's something in the microbiome of a metabolically healthy mouse that is impacting in a positive way an obese mouse. So that is definitely an area of research that is ongoing right now. And as I mentioned before, they are in trial right now for the use of stool transplants for C. diff, and it's really making a very positive impact. The other areas of research is how the microbiome impacts the brain. So we do make serotonin in our gut, and it does contribute to our overall mental well-being. Probably not in a very dramatic sense, but it does help. And what they are also researching is how neuroinflammatory disorders such as autism, ADHD, Lyme, dementia, some of those neuroinflammatory disorders really benefit from a healthier microbiome. So they are looking at that and they're trying to impact it through nutrition. And so what they do know is that typically anti-inflammatory eating like keto is really making a positive impact in people with neuroinflammatory diseases. So those are other areas of research, and they're also looking at how it impacts in depression and other mood disorders. So it is pretty exciting, actually. Okay, so I talked about the future trends. I talk about how to manipulate. So in the end of the day, the main topic of this is supporting your gut for really good nutrition, for really good food choices. And I recognize that it's challenging, especially if you're a busy professional. It's not impossible though. So I would encourage you as a professional yourself to be an example for your family and for the others that you work with. And also, how can we help the elderly? I wish I had the answers, but it's really challenging because and my grandmother was one of my favorite people, and she would hate when I say that she's so cute, but I really just love seniors, and they are really vulnerable. And how do we help them? I wish I had, again, I wish I knew, but I guess I would, if I had to say something, is there a way that we can help them by reducing the amount of these little packaged shakes? And maybe some of us have a good blender at home and we can make that for our loved ones and put it in the refrigerator. I mean, I'm lucky enough I get to do that for my dad. He's not elderly. I should not say that, but he's not elderly. But you know what I mean. He's in his 60s, and he doesn't always have the drive to like really make these things. So you know, I taught him how to make a shake, and so he's been doing that at least. And so that's all I can ask. So that's it. That's all I have to say. So thank you for listening. Thank you for inviting me and having me here. And if anybody has questions, yeah,
Thank you, Chris,
sure.
for this beautiful presentation.
Thank you.
I oversee the Parkinson's program at the Ridgewood YMCA,
Yeah.
and I have a lot of participants with multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, Lewy bodies,
Yeah.
Alzheimer, a little bit of everything, but they come with many conditions.
Yeah.
And they do ask a lot about microbiomes and the vagus nerve,
Mm-hmm.
because I do lecture them with support groups, and I keep trying to inform them about a diet. And you're totally right on the point that the appetite decrease, more intake of medications, carbidopa medications, also for depression, for sleeping. It's a cocktail. The question that I have for you: how would you educate this kind of population when they don't have any guidance? Because many of them, they live alone, and they want to live alone, and they don't want anybody to come and take them away from their houses. What would you say to them to educate them to have a proper diet that doesn't increase the toxicity in the brain, starting from the point of view that already dopamine is leaching because of their diseases?
So one of my favorite things to do, and this is definitely not a fan favorite, I love to go through people's pantries in their refrigerator. And so I do it through education. And to give you a quick story, my mother-in-law, years ago, I was newly married. She had a heart attack and stent the whole bit. And so we're driving out to Long Island, and the first thing I do is go in her refrigerator and her pantry, and I have 2 garbage bags. My father-in-law was about to lose his mind. And so he's a person that grew up just after the Depression. And so I'm very connected to that. I understand. But I'm looking at this vat of Crisco that's probably been there for 40 years. I'm looking at all of these things that come in a box and packages, and I'm like, and snack wells. And I think that for seniors, if I can speak to that, would be education. First of all, education. And I understand the need for something quick. It's easy. They might not have the mechanical dexterity to prepare foods for themselves. So education would be the first thing. Second would be involving the family if they do have family, and how can we look at other resources available to them for improved nutrition. And maybe it's one of these like Green Apron things or whatever, one of those like little food subscription things are that are it's one serving for one person. Most of the time, a lot of the stuff is chopped and prepared, and you need a couple of ingredients at home. I would probably start with something basic like that, so that, and maybe there's some leftovers. I would also educate them on how to involve their community. And so maybe they have a friend of the family or someone that likes to cook that can share what they are eating and bring over leftovers and then share it with their peers. That would be another thing. And then I would also look at some of these institutions, like who do they have governing, like who's cooking for these people, and what are they putting in, what are the ingredients, and again, as an idealist, I would love for everybody to eat organic and green. And I just know that's not possible for everybody. I get it, right? And so I grew up on food stamps. So I know what that's like. But can you make it work? You can. Frozen vegetables are better than no vegetables, right? And so I took a class with Casey Means, and she showed this graph. When you pick up a vegetable at the supermarket, and by the time you bring it home, the nutrient value is like a tenth.
Diminished.
Yeah, but frozen vegetables they maintain by almost 80%, and so they're typically cheap. They last a long time, and a lot of times they're covered by these like social card, like the EBT cards. And so you can make maybe if you teach a senior, getting them involved, because I do know that seniors also struggle with purpose. And when they don't feel like they have a purpose, they don't feel like they have anything to contribute. But if you could turn that inward, you have something to contribute to yourself. And maybe they have a little cooking class for them and making something very small and basic. And I went through this with my grandmother. I lived with her for a short period of time before she passed. And so I would make her, she was lucky though, because I lived with her. And I know that not everybody has it. So you'd have to incite the drive for themselves, to advocate for themselves, to make themselves a little something. I would rather see them pop open a can of chickpeas, put a little olive oil on and eat that, than, when I see senior citizens at the dollar store buying like potato chips, it just breaks my heart. I would rather see them pop open a can of chickpeas and just eat that.
Is that realistic though? I've never seen that. Someone that usually eats chips go and change the chickpeas.
Well, I guess it would come.
It's an addiction.
It's an addiction.
Everyone's addicted to
Totally.
the convenience, the
100%.
greatness, the taste.
Yep.
That's why they make chips out of chickpeas.
Yep. You're absolutely right. It would have to come through education and recognizing the negative impact. And so what I say to my clients is like, this is where you are right now. Do you feel really good about where you are right now? And if you don't, then you have to make the change. Otherwise, you have no business complaining about it.
But it really starts as a child, My
Yeah.
nephew right now, he's 21 years old, and he only eats chicken fingers.
I have one of those too in my family, yeah.
He's 6'3". He looks like, he's in perfect shape.
Sure.
But we all just worry
Yeah.
about the day when. So really, it's starting like yesterday and today for all these people. How can we? One of the things that happened in my life is my wife became gluten-free about 10 years ago because she became celiac.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, we thought it was the worst thing that could ever happen. But to be honest, it's a blessing.
Yeah.
Not to be able to have those cravings, because I'm now gluten-free by default.
Yeah.
But I ate plenty of gluten today though, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have my cheat days.
Sure.
But, I worry about my nephew that's
Yeah.
21 years old. He's never even seen a vegetable. He never plans on eating a vegetable. What is going to happen to that poor kid?
How's the eating life?
Yeah.
He's a young millionaire. He's traveling the world. He's got everything going. for
Yeah.
him. He's got a business.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. But his health is
Yeah.
going to be the
So he's going to everything with time.
Well, no.
He's shortening this.
Well, who doesn't know that yet?
We were discussing also, seniors and the fact that many seniors have, diminished financial resources.
Yeah.
So my question is this: I know that very often people in the nutrition world, tout the splendor of organic foods. The question is it really that necessary? I mean, are organic foods today really that organic, or are we just seeing a lot of, junk in the supermarkets that has some sort of certification, but it really doesn't make that much of a difference?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I get that question a lot. And, when you're talking about whole food, the rule of thumb is like, I think they call it it's like the I'm blanking right now. The dirty dozen. Okay. The dirty dozen, it's called. So if you're eating the peel of something, like a strawberry, then you want it to preferably be organic, because you're eating the actual flesh. An orange, you're peeling it. So you don't really need to buy an organic orange or an organic banana. You're peeling it. right? You're not eating that. So if I had to say to someone, try to go organic, actually, so local supersedes that, right? And so local organic is obviously the top of the food chain. So if you go to these farmers markets, like I know there's a couple of farms in like Wayne, we can like pick Ramsey's farmers market is amazing. And so they bring people from all over New Jersey. You see their vegetables, they're dirty and they're not perfect. To me, that is like heaven to me. And so I've been there before, and you could buy a giant bag of spinach and it's like $2, right? Throw that in a smoothie for someone. And, you know, it's
So you're
like,
telling me that organic blueberries from Peru are iffy?
they're iffy because they're being shipped across the world, right? And so by the time they get here, do they really have that much nutritional value? No. Because again, I took a class a couple of months ago, and so it has like a fraction of the nutrients. They're better off eating blueberries from New Jersey when they're grown in New Jersey. And on the off season, if they really want a blueberry, the frozen ones are actually really good.
Frozen,
Yeah,
frozen fruit are actually as good or better.
yeah. They maintain. Yeah, they maintain their nutritional value a lot longer than fresh.
Then you can freeze your own fruit too.
You can. So there's definitely,
season.
you can. And that's typically what I do. Like I go to the farm in Wayne and I'll pick my strawberries and I pick an absorbent amount and I just spread them on a sheet pan. I throw them in the freezer and then I have them for a few months in the wintertime. So yes, you can do that.
Apples or red apples are the worst.
So apples are sprayed heavily. They're sprayed heavily, right? So again, if you're eating the skin of something, you preferably want something organic if you're eating the skin of
So my
something.
mother-in-law, who takes the skin off the apple and, you know, and gives us little bags of skinless apple, is doing it.
She's probably doing you a favor. Now, the skin of an apple is pretty thin, so it probably is leaching through to some point for sure. And you know, when I talked about the environmental toxins, like that's just some of the ways we're getting it.
So is, by FDA standards, is organic fruits and vegetables similar to the FDA standards of, say, beef, where as long as 40% is beef, it's considered all beef? So what is really organic? Because I kind of feel like it's not really organic.
Yeah. So the term, the term organic, and I will not really get on my soapbox and speak that freely, but the term organic means that there's a certain allowable amount of chemical that you're allowed to spray. It's certainly certain chemicals that you're allowed to spray for pest control, and others you have to omit. That's as basic as I can explain it. So they have to meet, they do have to meet a certain standard, right? So it depends on what they're spraying, how much of it they're spraying, and what, yeah, that's how I would leave it. What are they spraying? How much of it are they spraying? And what exactly is the chemical compound that they're using? Because some spray that they use on vegetables and crops are more allowable than others that they use on crops.
And what about greens like romaine lettuce and things like that?
So ideally, you want to try to stay as organic as possible. And obviously, when you get it home, you do want to make sure that you wash it really well because they get buggy. So I'm lucky enough to belong to a CSA. I don't know if anybody knows what that is. So a CSA is a community share of agriculture. So you partner with a small farm and they might use some kind of pest control. Not all of them use like a spray. They are a lot of times not certified organic because the cost to validate that is very expensive. So some of them won't do that, but they are doing those similar practices. They might be just spraying around, you know, they're not spraying on the plant, but they're spraying around the plant. So that's another like category of how they get around and qualify themselves for organic. But if you partner with a local farm, a lot of times you're getting really good quality vegetables that are not sprayed and not laden with all of these like chemicals. And a lot of times it's very cost effective. I belong to one, and I think it's $45 a week for for a family of 4 organic produce, so I get it every week. So it's usually pretty affordable, and I think Adma's Farm here in Wyckoff, I believe they do it as well, and they also have pasture-raised meats that you can get through that farm. It's a very, very good farm, and it's a very small farm. So that's what I would say for a person that's on a budget. You can size it for one person, and get really good quality vegetables when they're in season.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Question on just medication, because like, sometimes we get referrals, we get face sheet, we see the numerous amounts of medication that a lot of seniors are on, which I'm sure you see. I mean, so you can imagine what that's doing in the diet. And being that, you know, like, I'm in the home care space, right? So
Yeah.
almost all the clients are on multiple meds and having some kind of digestion issues. What would, I mean, obviously there's not one size fits all, but generally speaking, is there something that could be recommended for a senior that's taking that medication?
So polypharmacy is a real big problem in adult and senior citizens, and I unfortunately see too much of it. And so when I see an 80-something-year-old person that's on, you know, a ShopRite bag full of meds, my question is, do they really need all of this? And so that really comes down to a conversation with their primary care provider. And so, unfortunately, in a managed care system, they are following an algorithmic protocol. You see this, this is deranged, you fix it with this. And so the conversation really has to be from someone that's advocating for them and asking them the hard questions. Do they really need a statin if it's causing myelopathy, they're having, you know, trouble with their digestion? Do they really need it? Is it really contributing or benefiting them on the back end and their quality of life? Is their cholesterol really that high that it's really contributing to poor health? That would be my question to them, because a cholesterol of 200 does not constitute, in my mind, a statin. If they have low blood pressure, they're not overweight, they don't have other metabolic diseases, right?
Sorry, I'm laughing because my cholesterol is 295, the total cholesterol, but I'm not taking statin. I come from Europe,
Yeah.
and the standards are different.
Yes.
It's 220
Yeah.
in a woman, so they're completely different than in the United States, and I refuse to take statin. You do the calcium scoring and it's
Right.
zero, and I just regulate it with exercise. It's family, it's due to family. I have it high. Everybody in my family
Yeah.
has a very high cholesterol, but what is high is also the good cholesterol. So I do refuse to take it.
It really comes down to risk quantification. And so if you are obese, you have multiple comorbids, diabetes, inflammatory diseases, your calcium score is high, your blood pressure is usually high, then maybe you do benefit. But I will say this, there's a lot of studies about statins that don't really move the needle. It moves it about 5 numbers, that's it. It goes down by 5, that's it. Even at the highest level of Crestor or rosuvastatin, it's 5, which is nothing to me. That's not even statistically significant. What moves the needle in someone that has very high cholesterol is the injections. Those are really moving the needle, and those are really making an impact. But statins have not been shown to reverse atherosclerosis.
But there are numerous ways of reducing
There are.
today.
There are. And so my question to the primary care provider is, can we look at this person, quantify their risk? Can some of these meds be tapered off? And I don't know how many physicians have the fortitude to do that.
Or the knowledge.
Or the knowledge, or do they want to take that risk?
And high cholesterol, some of it is inherited, because I knew somebody whose son was like 6, 7 years old and had high cholesterol. Okay, and he was not American born. He was not eating junk food. He was Korean, I believe. And in their family runs high cholesterol, having nothing to do with food, lack of exercise, or but it's just hereditary. And people have to understand there are more and more things that are hereditary that don't necessarily need to be helped with medication. You're not
Yeah.
going to put, you know, a kid under 10 years old on medication because you're reading his cholesterol.
Depends on where you live.
Well, but I'm just saying that it runs in the family.
Yeah, there's definitely genetic predispositions and genetic variants in people that have high cholesterol, but their risk is zero.
Heart disease one of the families.
Correct.
And there's definitively a connection between families that have heart disease and they have high cholesterol.
Mm-hmm.
So there has to be, you know, a risk mitigation based on knowledge and not just hearsay.
Correct.
And I also think that there are things in the air that we don't know about, because I know so many people who have had lung cancer who never smoked, who never was near any type of things, you know, chemicals or anything like that, but they got lung cancer and they were not near anybody who smoked either.
There's a lot of things that we could say about the environment, but I could leave that for another time. Any more questions?
I have a comment, actually. When you spoke about the fecal implant for C. diff, a friend of mine's father had that, and it has been very, very successful.
Yeah.
And his physicians are very careful not to just give him any antibiotic at any time. He has to really need an antibiotic. And I think it's been over a year now. It's
great.
Knock on wood, he has not had C. diff.
Yeah, it's great.
That was really successful.
Well, we're never intended to have a sterile gut. That's the worst thing that can happen to you, right? And so that's amazing. I mean,
it's amazing.
it's a
When
miracle.
she first told me about it, I'm like, it sounded like really
Yeah, it's disgusting.
crazy, but so.
So there's two different ways that they do it. They make a capsule.
To ingest
And then, or they'll do it mechanically.
like a suppository.
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, it's pretty. I know.
It shouldn't bother you, you know, if stuff that you're eating is equivalent, so it doesn't make a difference. Going to McDonald's is equivalent to eating that capsule. The capsule is healthy, right?
Yeah. All right. Any more questions?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.